I remember when she was turning 7, I just had this moment of like, oh, I need to hold this. I need to remember this because if I don't, we're going to be a year from now and I'm going to be like, where'd my baby go? What happened? Because we do kind of remember, like, ooh, I remember she walked for the first time when she was 14 months old, or she rode her bike for the first time when she was 8. But we don't remember usually like the last time, or we don't know when the last time is going to be when they say like mazagine instead of magazine, right? Like we don't always
Mhm.
know when the last time is going to be. So when we catch these glimmers of like, ooh, something's coming here, something's shifting here, to hold space for that and really recognize it is important. And it's why also I believe and think of like pregnancy as its own sacred event and birth as its own sacred event. And then parenthood as a much longer sacred event that's its own thing altogether. Because if we don't mark the time, we get lost in it. And then suddenly we're somewhere down the line and we go, oh, what happened to? How did I get here?
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Welcome back. We had
Thank
such a
you.
great conversation last time. So if you haven't heard Stephanie's first episode with us, make sure to go listen to the one about connection with your partner in pregnancy and parenthood. But today we're talking about the importance of ceremony and how to create your own ceremonies in life. So to get started, we just love to really jump in and start with, what do you mean by life transitions? And can you give us some examples?
Sure. So life transitions can really be any moment in time where a large change is happening, right? So it could be like if we want to go way back, let's talk about like when girls start their periods. That's a big one, or when boys go through puberty. There's some sort of initiation there, right? And then we think next like when folks get their driver's license or when they graduate college, and then we get into adulthood and it's like a change of job, getting married, having a child, any moment in time, really, where a shift that is going to inherently kind of change the state of being in your individual world or collective world. I consider that a life transition.
That's great. Right. Yeah. So then I guess, why is it important to acknowledge or to celebrate, if that's the right word, like those transitions in our life?
Yes, there is some celebration, right, in all of this, but I consider it more of like a reverential holding space for. Like, we want to take moments to and time and perhaps ritual or ceremony to mark the occasion, to say this is a significant moment. And by doing so, it creates kind of a cognitive, emotional, nervous system bookmark for us of this moment and what it meant or what its impact was on our state of being. And it could be something as small as, I remember when I think my daughter was 7 and her 2 front top teeth were out, right? And I just had this moment of acknowledgement of like, whoa, like once those come in, she's not going to look like my baby anymore.
Yeah.
She's going to be this different person. And 7, also from a developmental standpoint, is this very transitional point between early childhood and middle to later childhood, right? Where they really start to become their own sovereign being, right? They start to recognize that they are their own individual being in the world. They are not their parents. They are not their community. They are themselves. And so this is like the first big transition of childhood, I think, outside of like, when they go from being an infant to being a talking and walking person. This is where there's like this marked difference of kind of a baby to like not being a baby anymore. And so I remember when she was turning 7, I just had this moment of like, oh, I need to hold this. I need to remember this because if I don't, we're going to be a year from now and I'm going to be like, where'd my baby go? What happened? Because, you know, we do kind of remember like, ooh, I remember she walked for the first time when she was 14 months old, or she rode her bike for the first time when she was 8. But we don't remember usually like the last time, or we don't know when the last time is going to be when they say like mazagine instead of magazine, right? Like we don't always
Mhm.
know when the last time is going to be. So when we catch these glimmers of like, ooh, something's coming here, something's shifting here, to hold space for that and really recognize it is important. And it's why also I believe and think of like pregnancy as its own sacred event and birth as its own sacred event. And then parenthood as a much longer sacred event that's its own thing altogether. Because if we don't mark the time, we get lost in it. And then suddenly we're somewhere down the line and we go, oh, what happened to? How did I get here? And so it's the same thing. I think that's why like a lot of cultures have ritual around, like one ritual that comes to mind is the closing of the bone ceremony that are in many more indigenous cultures where the postpartum mom is tended to, they are wrapped, they are massaged, and it is this moment of saying, well done, body. Well done, spirit. You've done all this good work to grow this human and bring it earthside. And now you're feeding it and nurturing it and growing it. And our culture, compared to indigenous cultures in particular, really lacks in ceremony and ritual. But doing these things helps us say, like, in our nervous system, in our mind, in our emotional bodies, okay, this part is done.
Mhm.
And now we can, it's like a bookend. Now we are moving into this other era of time. And so in a woman's lifetime of being, right, we can think about the beginning of menarche as like, oh, childhood as we knew it is done. We are coming into a new body, a new state of being. We look at this again, in pregnancy and birth and parenting. And then, of course, the moments in parenting that I mentioned, like my daughter's kind of crossing this bridge from early childhood to later childhood. And the teeth being out was a marker. So for me, we didn't have big ceremony around that, but I did have my friend who's a photographer come out and take photos of us while that gap was there. And then she asked me to, be a guest writer for her blog to go along with that. And so I wrote a piece called The In Between that really talks about all of these moments of like, we don't really know when the last of something will be. We don't know when the first of something will be, but we often tend to like create markers on that. And so I think I was aware of the importance of ritual and ceremony before that, but it was really in that moment of seeing my daughter in this window, this very short window of time, that made me realize really the depth of the importance of honoring those moments and those times in a way that our bodies and our spirits remember, so that we don't have as many of those scary moments of like, and excuse my language, but there's no better way to say it. Holy shit, how did I get here? What,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what the hell happened? Right. And I do think some of like that does creep up and creep in like to postpartum depression. Like when women have not had the time and space to honor their pregnancy experience as its own entity, to honor their birth experience as its own entity, and to honor that, first 42 days postpartum. I do see that, we get to 6 months postpartum and there's suddenly this crash and burn of like, where did my, like I had a baby and now I have a baby, but it's not that baby. It's like a new baby that can sit up and is babbling and like, what happened? Right. And so
Yeah.
I really feel like it's a marking of time in a way. It's a way to say, oh, this version of myself, this version of my child, this version of my life is done in a way. It's over,
Yes.
and I love it, and I want to give it love and show it love and thank it. And it's even the same thing, like, right, if we maybe have experienced trauma and we get to a point where we have really, really integrated that trauma and we are living in a new way that's more honest and authentic, and we feel less anxious and we're really finding more joy, right? And that could be coming out of postpartum depression, it could be coming out of some other experience, but we get to this place of joy. We cannot fully experience that joy without taking some time to thank the other, to thank what was for getting us here. And so that's why I really think that like ritual and ceremony are very, very important. And we talked a little bit about connection in our last conversation. And I think in terms of cultivating and keeping connection, that's really where ritual comes in as well. Is it does, if we have these practices, the things that we tend to, that we keep as part of our cycles on a regular basis, it helps us stay connected to self and to other.
And one question that just came up for me is I'm hearing you use the word ritual and ceremony. Do you see, are those two different things in your mind, or kind of how do you think of those?
Yeah, so I feel like it's one of those things like, and I'm going to say this wrong because it's been a long time since geometry, but where they're like, every something is a quadrilateral, but not every quadrilateral is a square, like,
Yes,
um,
right.
so it's kind of like that is I do think there's an element of ceremony to every ritual, but not every ceremony is a ritual. So to in my mind and in my way of thinking, ritual is something that is repeated, right? So like the way I make my coffee in the morning in its own way is a ritual. I do it exactly the same way every day. It's like I do all the morning things. I drop my daughter off at school and I come back. And that's when I have like my moment of quiet to start my day. Like everything before that is starting her day. This is starting my day. And so that's a ritual.
Yeah.
It's something that's repeatable that we do again and again and again and again. Right. So like in religions, they have, you know, different rituals that come up every calendar year based on the holiday schedule. Ceremony may only happen once, right? It might be a one time offering to mark a certain occasion or transition. And so that's how I kind of differentiate between the two.
I love that. I think our world is so fast paced, and that invitation to slow down and thinking of the whole family being a part of that as well is so special because our memories are so subjective. And when you
Yes.
put that intention around it, I can see that it can help your kids remember and put the weight to that situation, the same as your husband or your parents or whoever is involved in that. So I like that it's almost creating that shared memory and that little stamp in time as well. I think back, we took a big trip when my daughter was 3 and I was pregnant with my second. My older daughter was 3, and I she's only 3. She doesn't remember it, but my husband created this video and put together videos and still photos and music, and it was this really special creation that he spent months on after that trip, and we would watch it almost like a ritual every Saturday. At one in the mornings on the weekend, we would watch it, and my daughter, now 8, remembers, "Oh, I love," but I think she's remembering the video because we just really created that video in her mind from the pictures from the trip, and so we remember being there real time, but she, I think, is just remembering this video that we watched. But anyway, that kind of spoke to me when you're honoring that transition, but you're also slowing down enough and putting the intention and putting all of your nervous systems together on that. I just think that is so profound and so special. And I wish that I've created that. Now I think, oh, my daughter's 8. I missed when she turned 7, so I'm thinking how I can create this. So, how can a person, a couple, a family start incorporating this? How can they start creating some rituals or ceremonies for themselves?
That's a great question. And I think that's one of those things that's like, it's hard to answer because the way folks see things and experience things is so different. Like what would be important in my home with my family is quite possibly very different from what would be important in your home. Like I love this video you're talking about. And she probably doesn't remember those things, Amanda, but what she does remember is the feeling that has been created through that sharing. And so, the ceremony was the making of the video. The ritual was the rewatching over and over again. But I think that folks, if they want to have ritual at home and everybody's flying in 20 directions, one of the easiest rituals to have at home is to choose one night a week, if you're not doing it already, that you all sit down together to eat dinner. Or perhaps you even step that up a little bit. And one day a week, everybody is contributing something to the making of that meal. And perhaps you have music on in the background, and then you sit down and you all share this meal together. And perhaps you add on to a layer of that to, each person sharing something very impactful from their week, so that there is this time where we're saying, where everybody's being seen, everybody's being heard, everyone's working together. And that creates this feeling of connectedness and cohesiveness, which, during the week, look, in my house, it's just two of us. It's my daughter and me. And we're still often scattered to the wind because she's got friend things and activities, and I've got work that I'm doing or other tasks that need to be done around the household. Sometimes it's just we have a new ritual in our house, which is, she does cook her own breakfast. She makes an egg. And so our new ritual, which is something that's fruitful for both of us, is that we work together to unload the dishwasher while that egg is cooking. And it takes about exactly the amount of time. And it's time that we're spending together as we start our day. And it's something that kind of gets us off on a good foot for the rest of what's coming in the day. In a way, it's like, here, we're setting ourselves up to be ready for what's coming symbolically. In a way, like, yes, physically and logistically, the dishwasher's empty. So now any dish we use during the day, it's there, but it's also kind of a symbolic, like, our space is clean, we're ready for the new day. So it could be something as simple as that. It could be, the weekly family dinner. It could be something more, right? It could be once a quarter, we do a really heavy duty backpacking trip. And what comes out of that is always a new sense of accomplishment and trust. So it really is unique to the individuals. But it, again, like, it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to involve a lot of, flowers and candles and an altar, or, but it can, like, it can be like very sensory rich, like typically when I do a ceremony for like a menarche acknowledgement, that does involve like an experience of like both celebration and groundedness. So we have snacks and we have tea, and like perhaps a henna artist comes in because, henna is reserved for rites of passage. And so sometimes we've included that. But then we close with a salt bowl ceremony, which is where you have a bowl of Epsom salt, and each individual contributes a natural item to that. So it could be like fresh flowers or pomegranate seeds or dried flowers or essential oil or herbs. And as they put it in the bowl and mix it in, they share their intention for the moment. And so then everyone's intentions and energy and their item are mixed in, and then everyone takes some of that home in a jar. So they have these moments of like of memory, and they can then pull that back out. Maybe they're having a really hard period or bad cramps, or you know, any number of adolescent challenges, and they can go to that jar and smell it or put it in a bath for themselves. So it's to your point you said earlier, I mean, about like the ripple effect of these things, like, how far can you take one thing? How far does it go? And when we change the honoring of, for example, of menarche for our girls right now in 2024, which hasn't been acknowledged as really a beautiful thing in our culture, like maybe ever. How does that ripple out into their children and their children's children? My experience when I started my period was very much like, okay, cool, here's a pad. See you later. Like there was nothing around it that said like, oh, this is beautiful. Let's celebrate your body. And so that's so good. Look, again, like that's a very complex kind of ceremony that we do for that, but it wouldn't even look the same for every group of girls that I would put that together for. So to the point of families or individuals being able to create their own at home, like it can be so tiny. It can be as small as the comfort brought by your everyday process in making your cup of coffee, or it could be something that's like really marking an event. I mean, a great example of that, right, is weddings. People really go over the top with that ceremony often.
Yeah.
And of course, it's very, very memorable, and hopefully in mostly good ways, right? Like there's always something. As in birth, right? If everything goes like the way you envision it, there's always like something that comes up that you're like, oh, that's not quite the way I wanted it. But, large or small, it's really about cultivating experience and cultivating the feelings that you want to have. And I think, again, this is another point of like, go inside. What's important to you? What matters most? And then build on that, like in small and large ways as you're called to. Part of my work is, sometimes people want ceremony or ritual around something, but they're not in a place where they can figure out what that is for themselves. And I help figure out what that looks like for them with their guidance, right? They have, we said this in our last conversation, we have the answers inside of us. We just have to be able to find them. And so generally that's what I'm working to do, is to ask questions to help folks find that, oh yeah, that's what I want to feel. That's what I want to experience. This is why this is important to me. And then help them to bring that to life.
Yeah. Well, even just acknowledge, like letting people know. Sometimes I think there's the aspect of like, okay, I want to go inside and find answers within, but when you don't know, it's possible. And we don't like, it's nice to have this conversation with you today, because a lot of people I don't think you think about, okay, a graduation ceremony or a wedding or something like as just kind of the things you do. I don't think of it as more of a way to process or honor times and connect with, it's well, and think of makes you think of like, oh, what way could I connect in my life? What things do I want to add an element of ceremony to kind of pause the passage of time, connect with my loved ones or with myself, and process. So just having that question, what are the areas of my life that I want to is
Yeah, you want to bookmark.
eye opening.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you're that guide in that situation. You can help people say, yes, the answers are within you. You tell me what you want to celebrate, and I'll help you craft how best to do that. And just going back to the menarche party, I can't not comment on that, because as a pelvic PT, we know like these certain life transitions affect your pelvic floor so much. Getting your period, stopping your period, getting pregnant, no matter how you deliver your baby, and then of course bringing your baby into the world. And it starts that young that I believe we don't acknowledge the period. We just kind of blow past right by that. I know when I got my period, funny story, my mom had to do stuff. She gave me some pads. So she was out during that day. By the time she got home, I literally had used up an entire box of pads, because no one told me that you don't change it every time you go to the bathroom necessarily. And I would literally just go to change it because I would feel a little bit and I was like, ew, gross, let's go, so I literally burned through like 24 pads in a day.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like
There's no talking.
Yeah. So many people have that experience. And so like, it's interesting being a doula, right? Like I can remember my daughter's always been exposed and these conversations have always been open. So I can remember one time like being on the toilet when she was probably 2.5, and she's naked because most of the time she was at that age. And I'm sitting on the toilet and all of a sudden I see her like walking like very funny with her legs together. I'm like, what are you doing? And then I see a little like string hanging like out of her butt, and she's like, I'm tamponing. And while I was on the toilet, she had gone in the drawer and like pulled a tampon out, and obviously she didn't put it like in her vagina, but she was just holding it between her legs and trying to walk. And so it's like, in our world it's been very different, but that's because I was very serious about like knowing that I didn't feel good about how things were introduced to me, handled with me growing up, that I didn't feel like I always had the right amount of information or the right amount of care. So with her, I've been really intentional about like nothing's off limits and we're going to honor it all. And I see the benefits of that in lots of places, like most obviously in her relationship to her body, with her body. It is so different in all the right ways from what mine was growing up and even as an adult, that like, I'm like, yeah, like all the time I'm so excited. And that's not just me and how I've handled things. It's also who she is at the core of her being. But by doing things differently, we definitely shift the paradigm. And so I think it's like, my hope is like by the time, Amanda, you're ready to retire, like the type of patient you're seeing and the information and self-knowledge and awareness they're coming in with is going to be very different from what you've experienced in your career so far.
I agree. That's everything. And that's why I went into private practice, is because and why we have our course is like, I want to intervene before. We want to prevent. And some of that prevention is us becoming empowered as parents and then teaching our children before they hit those life markers that, yeah, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of unknown, but we're in this together. You're not alone. This is not beyond what we
Shameful.
can handle.
Right.
Yes, it may be scary, validate all the things, but you're still you. And, I mean, bleeding for that long, I mean, it's a pain in the butt and no one is looking forward to it. And so, I just feel like the more that we can not brush the uncomfortable things under the rug and we can talk about them and normalize them, just starts at that person's relationship with their body, that later in life, and this is what I see with perimenopause and menopause, is these people have a lifetime of not getting in touch with their body, especially their pelvic floor, and then they can't advocate for themselves. And I tell my patients, like, no one is in your body except for you. So you
Right.
are the expert of your body. You need, not to say you need to, but it's so beneficial for you to know what you're feeling, to feel it, be able to communicate it, to advocate for yourself. And I really do believe it starts back when we start getting our periods, how we handle that, how we're in, relationship with each other. And there's such an opportunity that I believe you cultivate. And I'm so excited to have this conversation today, especially with that. Obviously, my very biased, I mean, there's good ceremonies about everything, but that one specifically is like, yes, this is going to make a positive ripple effect.
Yeah, thank you. I do think it's so important. And until you live life, I imagine most of your audience is probably women. And until you live life as a woman and you go through our culture, growing up in our culture as a woman, where you said something about like, nobody wants to bleed. That's not fun, like for that many days. But I think also our culture makes it even less fun, right? Like our culture is like, ugh, like this is like gross or it's terrible, it's awful. And the reality is like, that's just one lens that you can view this through, right? Like, no, it's not fun, but it also doesn't have to be awful. Like women can create ritual even within their cycles to honor what that is and truly the power that is in the female menstrual cycle, like the power of ovulation, the power of choice, the power of shedding, when we don't choose to become pregnant in that cycle, like there are so many elements to it that really can be honored and looked at in a different way to actually make it a really beautiful and powerful life source for us rather than something that's like miserable and gross and shouldn't be talked about, and I feel like there are so many things in the development of women and girls that are we don't talk about that in our culture that really just need to be normalized and discussed so that whether it's this is what period blood looks like so that when your daughter starts menarche it's not a surprise, or whether it's like, oh, it's totally normal for your vulva to itch when you start going through perimenopause, like let's talk about it instead of being like, oh no, I'm so embarrassed. Like none of it should be embarrassing because it happens to every female body. Like,
Yes, right.
like it is no different than pooping, honestly. Like it happens to every
Yeah.
female body. And so like, so why is it shameful? And I think it probably goes like way, way, way back. And this might be a whole other conversation to like, people recognizing the power that women held and wanting to diminish that. And so that's when it became shameful, but it shouldn't
Agreed.
be.
Right. And truly, and I do, and I just put this here too, that I was in my 30s before someone, it was a naturopath, really put it in my awareness that your monthly cycle is your body's ability to clear house, to detox. And I had been taking the oral birth control pill continuously, which when you're young and you're going out and in the summer you take trips and, oh, I don't, it doesn't matter. I don't, whether I get my period or not, because I just never get my period. So whether you're traveling or you're at the beach or beach houses, it didn't matter. And I thought that was hugely convenient. And then I literally was in my 30s before I realized, okay, convenience really doesn't weigh out for me now. I really care
Yeah.
about health of my body. And when you put that connection together, that yes, you could do that, and you're denying your body's ability to detox and clear out once a month, and that is a woman's body's is meant to be in a monthly cycle. It was just like,
Yeah, well, I'm
I
just
mean, I was a professional. I was even in pelvic PT at that point, and I did not that message through any of my training, and it's just crazy. So.
Well, and to allow it to function as it's supposed to. I mean, what are we doing to our bodies when we stop ovulation? Like beyond the detox factor, like our body is supposed to be creating. It's supposed to be ovulating. And what are we doing to other energies within ourselves when we squash that? And again, I just feel like now really going down a whole different pathway, but
I know. So I know because it's like, I'll hold the comment. Yeah, I know.
There's so much.
There is so much.
There's so much power in, like you said, the menstrual cycle.
Thank you for letting us, dip our toes.
Yeah.
Just because of the pelvic PT and me, I did have to talk a little more about that. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
And I'm here for it. I'm here to. I mean,
I know you are. That's fine.
I could go for hours, but I know we have like a window here.
Yes, I know. We want to honor your time So, how can people find you, work with you, and all your greatness?
Yes, thank you. So you can find me online at www.transitionalalchemy.com or on Instagram at transitionalalchemy. You can also email me at stephanie@transitionalalchemy.com. And I do work both in person in the Atlanta metro area and also virtually. So if you are farther away and you're looking for coaching or guidance on preconception, pregnancy, postpartum, or ceremony and ritual, really anything in between, we can work no matter where you are.
I love that. Great. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you for your time and your wisdom.
Thank you both.
And I really appreciate you.
It was a pleasure. Take care.
Are you nervous about the pain of childbirth? If so, you'll want to check out our free Birth Mindset Mastery Move training. You'll discover the one simple move that's the best way to prepare for the pain of labor. This is Amanda. I did this move throughout my second pregnancy, and it's what I teach to my private patients and what we teach moms in progressive pregnancy. It can help you build confidence, increase your pain tolerance, and prepare your body for a more positive birthing experience. To get access today, go to progressivepelviceducation.com/birth mindset mastery.